All right, so we're making a to-do list, and there's a bunch of little pieces, and it's oh yeah, yep, yeah, recording has begun. Um, so anyway, so essentially we're going to have this array of objects, and so the first thing we want to think about when we're architecting our application is we want to think about like what is the state going to look like? What is the project state going to be? And so it's going to be an array of objects. We're going to have an array of to-do objects. Each item in here, we'll give it like an ID, we'll give it a value, and then we'll give it a completed property on it. So like to set whether or not it's completed, and then yeah, the value will just be some text, and then yeah, we'll walk through and build it out. We use Create React App to generate the base React layout, and then we will add in Redux, React Redux, and then yeah, set up our reducers, and then we'll set up some containers, action creators, we'll put in some dummy data, and then we'll take it out, and then we'll anyway, add in an input field and do some stuff like that. So, all right. So I'm gonna turn my window. Let's see. Let's go into here. Let's go into lecture. All right. All right. Okay. So just create a new directory. I'm going to do create React app Redux to. Whoa! I just updated my computer, so I lost that, I guess. npmi-g. All right, well, let me install some different. You might have some interesting curveballs up here during this lecture. I did not think that that would remove my global npm stuff. Create React app. Redux to do. All right. -v. That's interesting. All right. So now you guys are, so different versions of Node, different packages require different versions. And so there's a tool that you can use called NVM. Oh man, I didn't know that. All right, everything was cleared out off my computer. Okay. So NVM lets you have multiple versions of Node on your computer, and then you can, then you can change between them. So let's do NVM. That's interesting. Okay. Sorry about this, guys. All right. So upgrade node, just like putting in those keywords. That's how I Google this. Then I'm going to run in and let's see. Sudo install n-g. Version. Okay. That might work. Okay. All right. Let's try this. Well, okay. Let me. The version. The required version 4 or higher. Let's do updated in 07. It kind of auto-completed that. So. Let's see. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Just remember it being easier than this. Okay. All right. So I guess. All right, let's follow this. This is not same. That same thing that we saw in here in that Stack Overflow question. All right. So I'm going to try this out. I think I used this before, but I really like it. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, so now we're finally there to building this. Yes, Redux solution lecture, and then now I am spending all this time figuring out node stuff. So. All right, so give us just a moment. Okay. I do Linux, or sorry, I do Vim for most of the stuff that I do, but I find that it's hard to read as I go through it. So, okay, so all right, so this spins up our this is that base application. We can start. So make sure that this is all up and going. Go console, but no errors. All right, here we go. So now let's do interesting. So let me try this real quick. All right, so now let's install the packages that we need. So mpmi-save, Redux, and React Redux again. Redux is totally separate from React. They're two different things. And so we have to use this package called React Redux to help us bind them together and use them in a. So anyway, like Redux was designed to be used with React. Like that was the original like desire behind it, but it can be used with like any other in other environments and other systems. So this is just the general design pattern. So it's a well thought out design pattern for how to build out an application. So. All right, okay, so now we have those things installed, and then again, no errors. All right, so let's come back here. So index.js, this is where a lot of this initial magic happens of like wiring everything up together. And so a couple things we're gonna have to import. So we have to import the provider component from React Redux. And you kind of think too, like with keeping your React Redux and your Redux things separate, like if it's just like JS stuff, it's probably from Redux. If it has to do with like React at all, then it's probably from React Redux. So our provider is a React component, so that's going to come from React Redux, not from just Redux. But then create store and, well, actually, no, sorry. From Redux. So you're going to learn about middleware today. but create store is just coming up from Redux. So, all right, so that, and then we're going to have to import some reducers. We haven't created them yet, but we're going to create a folder called reducers. And yeah. So, all right, so we have reducers. So provider, create store, and reducers. And so create store uses reducers to create the state object. And then we inject that in the provider. With provider, we wrap app inside of it. Let's see some questions. All right, great. Cleared up Alon's question already. Okay, so provider wraps app. So this is just this little wrapper thing that React Redux gives us, and this allows us to connect to two things. So, all right, so now on the provider, we have a store property, and then we pass it the store. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use create store to create the store from the reducers. And so that's going to pass that in. And then this is also where we can pass in our DevTools stuff. I'm copying this over from the file that I had. But to download it, you can just install the Chrome extension and then just like Google it, or it'll have instructions that you'll go right to it. You just literally copy this like big long thing and then just plug it in here. This gets read by the Chrome extension. So, all right, so now we have our app, everything plugged in. Okay, great. So this should be it for this file. So now we got to create our reducers. And so this right here too, there's just a lot of boilerplate. Like, I don't know, like you'll learn it, but then like what you'll do moving forward is you'll have this, like you'll have example code and you'll go back and reference it and you'll create this. Like I do that, like as an instructor, like I have to like go back and reference this because this is not the code you're writing every single day. Like components and stuff, that gets very natural. But like this stuff, like just like plugging it up together, like honestly, just like having a really solid like piece of like code to reference is like super valuable. Because then like you can go back and then use that as a starting point for building out stuff. So like eventually we get into like full stack application where you'll have like your server that's doing like authentication and the client that's handling all of that, and like Redux and routing and all that. Like you'll have like this example project with all those pieces together, and then you can use that as a starter point to build out your other things that you want to build. So that's another one of the big valuable pieces you can get from this, is not that you need to remember all of this, but that you have like a good enough understanding to know when you need to use which pieces, and then you have really good code samples you can go back and reference, because it's impossible to remember all this stuff like perfectly. Like it's just like getting familiar with it, so then you can quickly look it up when you need to reference it on Google or go back and find the previous code. Like this does not need to be like memorized or down cold. You just like understand high level what's going on, understand how to get things to work, and then you can come back and reference this. So that's the approach you should take with all of this. All right, so now let's so we got the kind of plug in. Let's create our reducers. This will help us like mock what our state, what our state will look like. So reducers, and then we'll have a Redux.js file inside of here. So all right, so now inside of our reducers, so you're gonna have one reducer for every property that you're gonna have on state. And the first thing we're gonna do is import some stuff from Redux. So we combine reducers from Redux, and then for combine reducers as a function, we're going to give it an object. This allows us to create our store, and then we're going to export the root reducer that's created. So the root reducer is what we're exporting, and the root reducer is what we're going to use inside of index.js right here. So this reducers right here is the root reducer, and maybe I rename that. But this right here is the root reducer that we're importing from the reducers file. So it's all the different reducers all connected together. In this application, we're only going to have one reducer. So I'm going to call this to-dos. It's going to be an array initially. So we're going to create our to-dos reducer. What's this class? To-dos reducer from to-dos reducer. I'll go on and create that file in just a moment. So then here's our to-dos reducer. So we have the reducer on, and then to-dos reducer controls what gets set for the to-dos property on our state. So now let's go create that. Okay, so to-dos reducer is going to be a function. Reducers receive two arguments. They receive the prop that they are controlling on the state, so to-dos, like the previous value of it. Every time an action is dispatched, all the reducers get called, and they get the old version of the state property that they control, and then the action, and then they decide based off the action if they need to change that property. So this action creator, it's going to get, or sorry, this reducer, it's going to get the action, and then based off of the action's type, it's going to decide whether or not it needs to change the to-dos array. So I'm going to initialize to-dos to an empty array, so that'll be its default value. And then down here, we're going to have a switch for action.type. I just have to go to this syntax for switch statements too. All right, so our switch statement right here. And then now we have a bunch of cases for the different types of actions that right now we're just going to set a default state of return to-dos. So we're just going to return the to-dos by default. Let's see. So is there a lot of static going on right now? Are people having problems hearing this?
Yeah, I've got a lot of static.
Okay. This is the review lecture of technical issues. This is like super bad. Is it like can you guys not even understand me? Like, is it? Is it let me try some headphones.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable. I think there's just some people that have their mic unmuted.
Oh, is it coming from another person?
Yeah.
I believe it's John Wells.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Let me know if this is better. Okay, that would help. All right, cool. All right, let's go forward. Okay, so action creator again, or sorry, reducer. That doesn't help when I mix up the names. So this is a reducer, and it is just a function. And this reducer controls what gets set for this to-dos property. So because an action, whenever an action gets dispatched, it goes to all the reducers. Right now we only have one, but if there were 100 reducers, the action will go to every single reducer. And those reducers decide whether or not they should either return the same to-dos, like at the same value that they were given, like for the property they control, or like whether to change it. So like whether to return a different one or the same one. So that's kind of that cycle, and I'll walk through that high level a little bit more when we get into that. But all right, so you have to-dos right here, to-dos reducer, control what's getting set there. Okay, so now our reducers are set up. So this all looks pretty good. Inside of our to-dos, I'm going to give it just a little object right here. So we have some dummy data initially. So I'm going to give this an ID of 1. I'm going to give it a value of walk the dog. I'm going to give it a value of complete false. Okay. All right, so that's going to be this first object. So again, very, very common way to structure your data in a JavaScript application is an array of objects. You're going to do that all the time. Arrays of objects, over and over and over. That is like what you're going to be doing all the time, arrays of objects. So.
Hey, Ben, so why couldn't it just be an object? Why does it have to be an array of objects?
Because you have lots of objects that you're wanting to connect together, and an array is a good way to clump those. If you did an object with a bunch of these objects on it, So this is going to have more objects added to it eventually. So like eventually it's going to have, a bunch of objects inside of it. And so generally the way to think about it is that the array has, it's going to have, everything that's in the array is of the same type or the same like pattern. So everything that's going to be inside of this array, they're all going to be objects that are to-do list objects. And so it kind of groups them all together. And then we don't need to have like a unique key for each to-do item. We can just group them all together inside of this like a bag. It's like a bag of to-do objects.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Good question. All right. So so reducers. So this right here is going to, it's going to control what gets set to the to-dos property. The root reducer thing. This combines all the reducers. Again, there's only one right now, but in the future you'll have multiple reducers you'll be using. And then we use that root reducer to create our store, and then this stuff we plug in to make our DevTools work. And then that provider wraps the app and makes it so Redux is available in our application when we use Connect. So now let's go and make some components. So inside of app.js, I'm going to rip out a lot of this stuff here. I'll keep this out. Sorry. So, just real quick, getting static, put a thumbs up on that if you're getting static on my comment. And I'm going to put it, let's see. Put a thumbs up on this comment if there's static if you're recording, or like with the video call. That was a sanity check. Okay. All right, sounds like a good joke. All right, let me try some more thumbs. All right, let's see if this improves anything. So, all right. All right, put a comment, put a thumbs up on this one now. If all right, okay, something funny is going on with my microphone. All right, cool. Let's move forward now. All right, so let's first thing we want to do is let's get our to-do list and let's display it. So let's go and display everything. So I'm going to make another. Well, I'm going to make the app.js right here the container. So we're going to. This will be our containers. We're going to do import connects from React Redux. And then now if we can run here, let's do. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create another function called const map state to props. This takes in the state object, and then whatever we return is going to be mapped into the props for this component. So this allows us to specify like how we inject things. And so, because maybe on our state, maybe there's 100 reducers on here, but we only want like 2 or 3 of the properties to be injected into app. This right here allows us to control that. So right now it seems kind of overkill because all of it is, but if we had, like if we had other like properties on here, so if this was like, some other prop like that. So this right here, like let's say we don't need that property inside of this app component. And so we're just going to map in our, we're just going to inject the to-dos array. So to-dos, this will come from state.todos. All right, so this right here, this to-dos, has to match exactly with this one. So this right here, so this is Foofy, then, oops, then this is Foofy. All right, So this is Baz, then inside of here we'd reference it with this .props.baz. So that's how the mapping is happening. So this right here is referencing the state. This right here is how this will be available inside of the component. So it is not assigned to the state of the React component. It's just a prop. But with the connect function, it will. Well, yeah. So it is different. It does not get automatically added to the state on the property. Yeah, so prop to the global state. Yeah, so like the Redux state, like the big state object that's like separate from all the React stuff, it's the React prop is connected with a property on the big state object. Yeah, so it's a lot of like the terminology here. We have React props, but then we also have properties on objects. And then we have React component state, and then we have Redux application state, which are both of those are like kind of two different things. Okay, so I have 3 components. I can link to state, other property. Yep, yeah. And if we wanted to connect to this other, like some other prop, the way we would do this is some other prop, state dot some other prop. So this is how we'd connect it. If we had other components that like wanted to connect to it, then yeah, they could just connect to that and not connect to this foofy property. So. Call it the Redux state. Call it the Redux state. All right, so I'm going to change this back. So let's do to-dos. I'll leave us some other prop on there. But if we come into here, oops, change this to to-dos. Okay. All right, so let's inject it. Or right now, this is just a function, but then we do the connect thing right here. So we use a higher order function. So connect with map state to props is going to return this right here evaluates to a function that we then invoke with the app component class that we pass in. And so then it's going to inject our to-dos into the app component. So that's what this is doing behind the scenes. So again, like there's some magic going on here. Don't worry about it. It's just we need to make our Redux object that's totally separate and in its own space, floating around. We need to connect it with a React component so we can access the Redux state. That's what this is. That's what this is all doing right here. All right, so now we have our this.props.todos. Map state is a callback from root reducer. So map state to props is a callback function that we pass to connect. And so connect, it does not go to the root reducer, but state right here is essentially like, you can think of it as like that root reducer. It's the state that was created for the application. Yeah, and so we'll go over dispatch in just a moment. All right, so yeah, so create store is where all the reducers get, they create the Redux state object inside of create store. So again, create store, root reducer, this creates the store or the state, store state, those are the same thing. And then it's just a big object, and then we connect to it right here. This is how we connect to that big state object, because that state object initially exists independent of our React application. And so connect allows us to connect this specific React component to the state object. All right, so let's go and print some stuff out real quick. So All right, now let's do to-do dot value. Okay, we're just going to print out the li right now. All right, we see it. We have walk the dog. Okay, so there's our component. There's no errors. We read it in, and then we displayed it out. So it's an array of objects, so there's only one thing to map out right now. If I went in and added in another object, I just copy it in like that, we see there's two of them. So it's just going to display this array going down the page. And so that's a super common task that you're going to do as well. Displaying arrays of objects. You do that all the time. Okay. So map asynchronous to property. So this right here, the map needs to be done on a synchronous, like not asynchronous. So like this prop is coming in synchronously. If you needed to retrieve it asynchronously, then there's another step you have to go through, which we'll be talking about that later. But yeah, because usually this like to-dos, you're not going to have a JavaScript file with like to-do objects on your machine. You're going to be making a request to a server to grab that information and then display it. Okay, let me make sure things are good. Okay, all right. So now, all right, so all these different LIs that we're displaying. All right, so now let's create an input. So above the UL, so we'll do an input here. And so, let me just pull some up real quick. All my Zoom stuff is covered. All right. Sorry, okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is on this input, we have to map it up, and this is very, very similar to how you did like your to-do list before in your last project. So there's like a couple things you have to map up. And so on change, we're going to have this update new to-do. So we're going to put a new to-do on our state for this component that we'll add in just a moment. Placeholder, new to-do, and then value is going to be this .state.new to-do. All right, so that's how this input's going to do. I'm actually going to wrap this in a form so we can take advantage of the submit functionality. So on submit, we're going to say this.add to do. So we're going to go create those functions now. So let's do so constructor, super, and then for the props, we'll feed that in here as well. So the props, all right, now let's do this .state. So give it the initial state. So this state right here is for the app component. This is not the same as the Redux state. So on our state, we are going to have our new to-do property, which we'll initially set to an empty string. And then we're going to have an add to-do and an update new to-do function. And I'm going to bind to them right here. So this update new to-do, equal to this update new to-do bind this. And then this add to-do, this add to-do bind this. So this creates the bound versions of the two functions. So we create our state to track our new value. We have our form right here to allow us to track the inputs. And then it's going to connect with this. So now you're going to add this add to do and update new to do React component. So again, I'm moving a little faster through this because this is exactly the same, like line for line, what you did on your last project. So all right, let's do add to do. So this is what they've submitted. We have to stop the form from refreshing the page. And then we're going to do this is where we're going to dispatch our action. Okay. All right, and then now what we're going to do as well, so add to do, we're going to have our update new to do. It's going to do this set state of new to do event target method. So this is how we access the value right here of the input field. So this gives us the value. So let me just update our local state. So this right here, we're going to return back to. I'm going to come back to this with our action creator. So as our user action creator, okay? All right, so again, we're almost there. This is almost done actually. So come back in, say what we need to do, type stuff in. Okay. So just to like make sure this is all working, let's look inside of React. Now let's look inside of React. We have connect, and here is our app. And then we can see on the new state, you can see that it's highlighted in yellow, but the value, you can see how it mimics exactly what I type in. And then we also see to-dos coming in as a prop. Okay. All right, so now let's go back in and let's work on being able to create and add a new item to our reducers, to our state. So we're going to need to create a new file, actions, index.js. So this right here is going to be our action creators. We're going to do export, add to do. And so then we're going to have a to do that's passed in. And then in here, we're just going to do, we're just going to return an object. Eventually, when you get into some more advanced patterns here, you can return a function as well with some middleware. So that way an action creator can dispatch different kinds of actions, can potentially dispatch different types of actions depending on your logic, or like if a request fails or error handling, stuff like that. But anyway, so we'll be touching on that a little bit later today. So, all right, so we have this object that we're going to be returning, and it has to have a type. And then we'll say, I'll call this new to do. And then its payload is going to be to do. So this right here is how we know, this is what we check for. The type is what we check for inside of the reducers. Because the action creator, this function, when we call it, this action object gets sent to all the reducers. This action object is then going to get sent into our to-dos reducer. And then now we're going to do, we're going to have a case. We're going to say new to do. And so now here, if it's a new to do, instead of returning just, like what we need to do is we need to, instead of just returning the array as it is, we need to add the item to it and then return that as well. And so it's also important with Redux state, we do want to do the same thing here that we do with React components. We don't want to modify the values there directly. We want to treat them as immutable. So this leads into this. This is a functional programming design principle where we don't want to just like directly change the array. We want to create a new array that looks like what we want, and then we return that, and that replaces the old array. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to say return todos.concats action.payload. And so action.payload, so todos.concat is essentially like, if you're just adding a single item to an array, it essentially behaves like push, but then it returns a new array with the new item in it. So that's essentially what concat is doing. So todos.concat, it's going to produce a new array that's going to have the two objects in it. So it's going to have this example one that's already in there, and then the new one that was added. And so then this array gets returned from this action creator, or from this reducer, and then that's what the new to-dos property is set to. So the to-dos property, it used to be an array with one object, and now it is overwritten with an array with two objects. So that's the flow there. So it overwrites it. And then as that changes, the containers are notified, and then they re-render if they need to. So this is all we need for our action creator right now. And then now if we, let's make sure, just double check those are exactly character for character. Okay, so now let's go into our JS file. Let's add in our action creator. So we're going to import, I call it add to do. Oops. Add to do from actions. So again, if there's an index.js file in the folder, you don't have to specify it. You can just target the folder and it will grab an index.js file. It has to be called that exactly. But so this right here is equivalent to saying this, like those two lines are the same. And this is the same. So there's 3 different ways we can write that import statement. And they're all doing the same thing. So it's just going to assume that there's an index.js file in there. It's going to assume it's a JavaScript file. And it's going to pull off the add to do function. And now,
so, hey Ben,
yeah.
If you in your actions folder, if you had multiple .js files, then would you have to specify that you wanted the index one?
No.
So, okay.
Yeah, because it will automatically grab the index file. If you didn't have a file in there called index, then it wouldn't grab anything by default. It wouldn't know what to grab.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's just like it just does that with a file called index.js. So, and we're actually doing the same thing here with reducers. When we import reducers in our index.js file, I'm just doing import reducer from reducers, and it's grabbing the index.js file and it's ignoring this one. So that's how kind of like it all webs together. All right, cool. All right, good question. Okay, so now let me just we're just about there. So let me just add this thing in real quick. So, all right, so now in order to inject our actions in, we do a different little thing. We pass in an object with the action creators on them as the second argument to connect. So now we do add to do like this. All right, then that will inject it in. So now if we go back in, let's refresh this and oops, export. Oh yeah, oops, I gotta put const in front of it. So I kind of mix that up sometimes. So get out of here soon. Okay, all right, export const add to do. There we go. So you have to like define the full function and then do it. I mean, alternatively, you could also write it like this, like const add to do, and then we could say export add to do like that. Like they're both doing the same thing. So usually you see it written like this. Okay. Notice I did not put default on it. This is just export. So when I do export, that means I can go in and grab the specific function out of this file by using a name. So like with app.js, I do import add to do, so it's grabbing a specific file off of that. When I do export default, which is what you're doing with your React components, it means that you're not going to, means there's only one thing that's being exported. Well, by default, it's the default. So if they don't specify a specific thing to grab out of the file, then this is what's going to be exported. Okay, so anyway, we'll come back and revisit this. So let's go back and look in here. All right, let's look at our app component, and then we see now add to do is on there as a prop. So it was added on. So we have add to do. So add to do is now available. So now instead of here, we're going to do this dot props dot add to do. Oops, I'll write that. We're going to pass it an object, and then on the object, we'll give it an ID, which will be this dot props dot to do's dot length, and then we'll give it. We probably don't need to do an ID actually. Yeah, let's just do this. So let's just do value, which will be this dot state dot new to do, and then we'll have a complete property, which will default to false like that. And then now we need to set the new to do thing on state back to an empty string. So this dot set state new to do will be an empty string like that. So we're going to run both of those. All right, let's go ahead and test this out. And it works. My heart always stops for a second when I'm doing this live coding. Like, is there going to be some really nasty bug that's going to pop up? So, okay. Sorry, I missed a couple of your questions, Alon. I had the chat thing hidden behind everyone's faces. Okay, I still don't get why to bind the function you showed action as an individual component to Redux. Okay. So question. All right. So a question about binding, why we have to do this. So it's because these functions in here, they're getting executed out of context. So right here on submit and on change, we're giving them the literal function code. It's like it's taking this code and sticking it there, and they're being executed like away from the object that they're originally attached to. And so we have to bind this specifically to those methods. Yeah, I would have. Yeah, so don't stress about that too much right now. It's pretty much just if you're using this keyword inside of a method on a React component, then you have to use you have to bind it. Okay. Another thing too. Again, like React components, there's like some of the methods on here have like unique names, like constructor and render. Those are like built-in ones. Like constructor is unique to the ES6 class. Render is a React thing that's added in, and so those have like set behavior. These ones are ones that I just defined. So there's a couple other like different lifecycle methods that you can write where the naming has to match up exactly, but some of these as well are just open, like you just write. You can name them whatever you want. So like add to do and update new to do are just names that I picked. But render has to match like those letters, like letter for letter. So okay, all right. So now, so this too is like a little bit of a contrived example because it's like where Redux really helps is when you have a big hierarchy of lots of nested components, and then like components down at the bottom need to communicate with the ones up at the top, and just you get this information that needs to be like in sync across all these components. And so Redux significantly simplifies the way that you build a larger application. So like for something really small, it might be overkill, but if you're going to build something that like has moving parts, like you're going to build something like Facebook, which is incredibly complex, you'll want something like React or like Redux. You'll need something like Redux to be able to manage everything that's going on. Okay. All right, so let's look at. Yes, yeah, that's how I put index files in every folder. Let's see. Okay. So, all right. So if we were to do the ID, I would just have like if we were to put an ID on this, I would just make it equal to like the length. Generally, with IDs, you're never writing them yourself; they're being generated. You have some tool that's generating IDs; they'll be long, and the ID is probably being generated on the server. So you're never like so. Don't worry about like having to generate IDs or anything on the client. A unique ID will generally be generated by the database on the server. So that'll handle all of that for IDs. So let's look at a diagram of this. Sorry.
Ben, this is a little off topic, but how come you, like when you're making edits and you're refreshing, why do you need to refresh? Is your render method not functioning?
I think it's just force of habit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't need to refresh, but that's just force of habit. So yeah, so nothing's wrong. It does work. So yeah, as I change stuff in here, so if I save and add that back, that should, so it'll automatically refresh.
Got it.
I didn't type a refresh there, it automatically did it.
Got it, thanks.
So yeah, so create React app, it will detect when you save your files. Once you save your files, it's going to go in and do a refresh. Okay, let me, there was that really good example about books. There we go. All right, so I really like this one. So again, this is like the big circle. So this right here is what the state looks like. So we have the state, so we have active book, then we have a list of books, like one they've clicked on. So we come up, and then we see that, you know, like they're like displaying a list, and then this right here is the one that was selected, the active book. User clicks on it, so your HTML and everything, they're listening, they're waiting for these events to fire, and then that's the on change, the on click, things like that, and then we have these action creators that we're going to call inside of those click handle or callbacks. So user clicks, we call the action creator. The action creator returns an action. An action is just an object. You see, like it's just a plain object with a type and then some other property for like the payload or book or whatever value you're passing to the reducers. So this action is created. The action is then fed through the reducers. It goes through all the reducers. The reducers decide based off of the action whether or not they need to change the property that they control. And we do that with a switch statement. So if it's an event that they care about, so it's kind of like firing off an event. It's like you broadcast it out, and then all the reducers listen to it, and then they all decide and whether or not they need to produce a new state. And a new big state object is going to be produced every single time this action is fired. So like an action gets fired, new state object is produced. But maybe it's like 99% the same. Maybe only like one little thing changed on it. But every time every time an action creator like runs and fires off, dispatches an action, it's going to a new Redux state object is created, and in that new Redux state, it might be identical. Maybe a ton of it changed. Maybe only a little bit changed. What changes is based on what the reducers return. Whatever all of the reducers return based off of the action, that's what the new state is going to look like. And so this produces a new state. And then the different React components are listening. So like this right here, all the React stuff is listening. And if a property that like the container was connected to changes, then the container re-renders. And then all of its children will re-render if their data has changed, if their props have changed. So that's like this cascading style, like this flow, this circular flow. So like I click on something, event occurs, action is dispatched, action goes to the reducers produce a new state. That new state then, so the React components, if they see that the state has changed, like the parts that they care about, then they re-render and then re-render all of their children components. Then the user sees the new view. So like that's what's happening here as well. So like I type something in, I hit enter, action is dispatched to the reducers, the new to-dos reducer. It adds a new item to the array. It returns the new array. So the state is now different and has a different array on it. The container component detects that array changed. So the container re-renders. That's what makes it so we can see this new to-do item that was added, because the map function was run again with the new prop that came in. So we see the new to-do list displayed. And then if there were children component, they would be re-rendered as well. And then now we're back at the new state of our application, waiting for additional user input. So the actions that are fired, your action creators, those run usually in response to user events. So like clicking or hovering or hitting submit on a form, or what you'll learn about today is like making an HTTP request and the response comes back from the server. That event, when that event occurs, that's when the action creator will be fired. So this is the general flow of it. I didn't want to work through like the whole checkbox thing. That's just kind of the same idea. Very similar to how your last React went. What we'll do is I'll add that part in, and then I'll push this up as a solution branch to the Redux project. So you'll be able to go in, look at the solution branch, and then see how this solved it. So, all right. Okay, so we've gone over a minute. Sean is going to be going, he'll be going over all the HTTP stuff with you guys, making all their different requests. We're experimenting with a little more of a flipped model. It's something that research is really showing that it is incredibly helpful to students. And it's something that I've experimented with in educational settings before, and it's been extremely effective. And so we are going to be doing a little bit more of a different approach that you guys will be getting used to that. So I anticipate that it will, I think it's really gonna help you guys get this stuff down. So anyways, you'll be going through that with Sean after lunch. All right. Let's see if we can ask this. I know we're real quick. Okay, so flip model. It's not a code thing. It just what you'll be doing is you'll get like a condensed introduction to the concept, and then you'll have like a little mini lecture that you're going to work through, and then and so the idea is that you'll eventually, like, these will be like little recorded things where you'll kind of like watch this introduction, and then you'll work through the mini project. The teacher will come in and then help like answer questions and work through the mini project with you. So it's kind of like this little mini sprint before you do the big full sprint. And then just like going through this cycle of like you receiving instruction, then you working on it individually, and then coming back and then asking questions and working through it and doing a review with the instructor. That model is something that we're going to be introducing that we feel is going to really help you guys. So. Okay, all right, so everyone, you can break for lunch. I'll tell Sean that we went over a few minutes, and so plan on starting your lecture at 1:05. So make sure that you get a good lunch. I would encourage you guys to go and, take a run if you can, or get outside and anyway, do some things that are healthy. Cool. All right, I'll be posting this solution. And then Alan, I'll look at your specific code in just a moment and give you some feedback on it. Cool. Yeah. So this will be posted up under the solution branch. So that will be available in a bit. Yes, in the video. Get that up ASAP so you guys can take a look at that. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.